Health coaches are a relatively new profession that has grown over the last decade, incredibly. You can search on Google for health coaches and you're going to get hundreds of results. But navigating and understanding, who is a good health coach? Are their credentials, sufficient? Are they just talking a good game, or do they really have the background and the understanding to help you achieve your health goals? My next guest, Seamus Sullivan, is a health coach. He's got some incredible credentials and an amazing background. And I'm going to talk to him about, what does it take to become qualified as a health coach? And, are those basic qualifications even enough? Should consumers really be looking for more? Because health coaches they provide an incredible service that fills a niche, that fills a gap and bridges a gap in the healthcare system where people are wanting to live healthier longer. They're wanting more longevity. They want more lifespan, more health span. And conventionally, physicians don't have the time nor the knowledge, frankly, to help people achieve that. Nurses, nurse practitioners, PAs, none of them have the credentials or the ability, the time to be doing that, at least within the conventional system. So health coaches, again, may be a great fit for you. So Seamus, thank you for being here. I'm excited to
Yeah.
talk with you about this.
John, thank you so much for having me. And for the Delivering Health podcast listeners, for the folks who've been here for a long time, this is a great platform. I really appreciate it. So if you're listening, make sure to give John 5 stars. And if you haven't supported him, that takes like 5 seconds. So for those listening, give it to him. He's putting out great content. And if you've been with him for some time, it takes just a moment of your time to make it happen. But John, yeah, to answer your question, health coaching is a booming profession within the clinical realm and in the private sector as well. And to just be frank, I think there's so many ways to skin this cat of that answer, but to have a great health coach, I think let's just start out with a credential. I think that might make sense because then at least as a listener, someone looking for it, they're a person that has gone through the ranks, they have gone through what they needed to make happen to be there. And I think having a health coaching qualification from the Board of Health and Wellness, so the National Board of Health and Wellness Coaching, it is an extensive track to get there. For me, it was upwards of 18 plus months. And you have to go through a qualifying course to go through that. I went through Precision Nutrition's Master Health coaching platform just because I've always loved Precision Nutrition's way of coaching and just been that's how I've been trained as a nutrition coach. And then directly goes right into the board licensing. So I think that's probably where most people can look like if they have this quick qualification. That's a quick, just, all right, quick skim. I can see this person has this qualification. I know they've hit it. Then I think to qualify them, it has to be probably more personable.
So can I ask you a
So,
couple questions about that?
yeah,
Because
go ahead. Yeah,
I think most people out there, I'm not familiar then of what you
yeah,
learn within that
yeah.
qualifications track and
Mhm.
education. What are some of the things that are taught?
Yeah, no, great question. And thank you so much for pausing me there a little bit. The the best way I can kind of explain it is the motivational interviewing process is going through what coaching psychology looks like and being able to work with someone. And in a session, we went through so many things, whether it would be breakout rooms and being in those live sessions to learning the textbook of what all these definitions are and everything. But I think primarily being able to be a great motivational interviewer, someone that can work with someone in front of them, whether they're working through ambivalence, through behavior change, and just being that assist for them. So over that 18 months process, we went through what it would look like to be in a session, to ask those questions, to keep someone accountable, but also yet be empathetic, right? And understand that the person in front of you, and we talk about this in the health coaching realm, is we work with the clinical teams such as yourself, right? Where the physician has the physician's hat on and they're prescribing things. What that is, it's a lifestyle, nutrition, or exercise intervention. The coaching hat from the health and wellness coach is a little bit different. It's putting on this other hat where you're working with the person, speaking with them, and allowing them to sift through the information they've been given and help them work through ambivalence being like 50-50 into something like I want to do it, I know what to do, but there's these beliefs, these commitments, these other things that are happening in my life that's making me struggle to do what the doctors tell me to do. And I'm going to be that person that, walks with that person, holds their hand and just kind of walks with them through the process. And that whole 18 months was a lot of that, being able to be in the process with a person.
And
Primarily,
my understanding that within that there are strategies and tactics that you then help people implement to
yeah,
lower those barriers.
yeah,
Not just talking to them about what their ambivalence is about, but there are actually physical strategies that can be incorporated to make it easier for people to make the changes that they want to make and basically get them unstuck. And
yeah,
that can be a valuable role that you and other health coaches play. And I'm curious though, it's not simply going to be like any conversation when
yeah,
somebody's dealing with different challenges in their life, like, how do I start eating better? But
yeah,
there are other questions that I'm sure people ask you about nutrition,
yeah,
dietary supplements, about different types of exercise, and of course you don't want to give any recommendations that could be dangerous for somebody.
yeah, yeah.
And so I don't know if that's part of that initial training or not, or just that all health coaches would get who go through similar training, or that's because I know you are have expertise in all of those areas. We've had conversations
Yeah.
before, or if that's just the baseline that all health coaches get, they'll all have the nutritional medicine, nutrition knowledge, the exercise knowledge, the
Yeah.
lifestyle coaching knowledge, or are these things that you've gone and pursued on your own?
Yeah, so to answer that first part, they do cover some general guidelines that they have to follow around basic clinical nutrition, clinical like exercise recommendations that they're just like, easy talking points with. But my background is in exercise science. That's what I got my degree in, and I've done multiple nutrition continuing education, and I had to pursue that knowledge myself. And primarily in my day to day, primarily in the work I'm with Synergenics, clinical exercise and clinical nutrition, we talk about more about like optimizing longevity, and those recommendations I work with the physician on because we do cover everything that's going on with the person from head to toe, right? From labs to scans to different things. Primarily, that's the doctor's job to review those. And then we work together to go, okay, what does this person truly need at this moment? And I have to put my coaching hat on to help them go through those. But I have to create those programs, I have to create the plans. But again, it's working with the person. Like you said, it's a different conversation because I can't give someone a blanket template. I just hate that. I don't like to use that term, but we have these things like diets and like exercise plans, and it's like do this, do that. It's like anyone can do that, right, John? What it is tailoring it to the person based off of everything they've just done in a day with us, but then also what they're willing and ready and able to do. Because someone can be truly motivated, but that motivation is not anything to me truly until they show and earn that behavior day to day. And that's where again I walk hand in hand with them to make sure that whatever commitments they made to themselves, they're sticking to it.
So let me ask the sort of the reverse of the initial question I
Yeah.
asked. You know, what is it? What are some red flags that people should maybe raise some questions, or they should maybe have concern before signing on with somebody who calls themselves a health coach?
Oh, that's a great question. That's a great question. I could start from there. I would definitely say somebody that's talking in absolutes. Anybody on social media that's telling you you can or can't do a certain, like you can't do this, you have to live this lifestyle, you have to follow this specific thing. Absolutes are probably the worst. I definitely tell people to stick away from those folks because there is no absolute. It's very nuanced. It's a very nuanced conversation, especially when it comes to your health. So if someone is telling you as a health coach, like, this is how you're supposed to eat. This is the diet you're supposed to stop, whether it be from vegan to carnivore to whatever the next big diet is, or hey, take this supplement because this is what it is for you. If people are giving you advice, and you're, let's just say, scrolling through social media, because that's where a lot of us live nowadays in the digital age, and they're just blanketly stating that without A, putting you in the context, and B, actually citing the science behind it and working with the team for you to get that help, I definitely steer clear of them because it doesn't have you in mind.
So it sounds like you're looking, if you personally were looking for a health coach,
Yeah.
one of the things that you mentioned is a team. So
Yeah.
that somebody is not just on their own doing everything, they are working within a team environment, whether it's with a PA or a doctor,
Yeah.
nurses. I don't know what else, dietitian. I don't know what other parts of a team you think are important to have.
Yeah, here in Centogenics, we do definitely have like a physician, we have a coordinator, we have all these things, and we have a vast amount of other performance health coaches with backgrounds in exercise and nutrition as well. But just like, but the, but the, but there are other teams out there that have those dietitians, or you can refer out like if you really needed to, especially for, even though my background is like an exercise, right, John? I can make recommendations, talk about exercise, do all these things, but I'm not going to be hands-on with somebody. So I have to have a team that I can refer out to that I trust with that person in their location, things like that. So definitely being able to rely on others and being able to go, hey, this is where my specialty ends and where someone else's has to step in. And I think that's a great job of the health coaches in knowing that because they can't do everything. They kind of have to fill a lot of roles, right, John,
Yeah.
to that not fill, but be able to intersect where multiple roles are so that they can help move the patient, the client along, but they're not necessarily going into those roles deeply. So yeah.
I know I've had conversations with people who've used health coaches before, and they've said to me, I've asked, did they review your labs or did they ask about labs? And sometimes the answer is no.
Hmm.
And I'd love to get your take on that. Like, are labs important when
Yeah.
working with a health coach? Are there any minimum types of labs? I know you've mentioned Centogenics a couple of times.
Yeah.
The clinic you work for, so I definitely want you to talk about kind of your approach there, but
Yeah.
more general, just that question
Yeah.
of
I think so too. I think, I don't think you necessarily need to look at the labs when you're working with a health coach. I think if you're working on a specific goal, is the lab necessarily needed? Are these other tests necessarily need to get to the desired goal? Now, we do it here with our day-to-day. I do review them, but they're not anything I review without the physician's guidance or the physician's interplay with that. And I'm not looking at anything to diagnose or to do that. That's the physician's job. I'm just looking at them and going, okay, what constraints are we having here that lead to lifestyle modifications that we need to make? So, for example, obviously we look at A1C, and that being a marker of, the last 3 months of sugar in the red blood cells. So for us, I just look at the labs to give me an idea what is going on with this person's lifestyle, and that could just be a speaking point for us to go, hey, I know you've reviewed your labs with a physician. What is it you'd like to work on primarily from here? Again, going back to that A1C, yeah, Seamus, I want to work on the A1C. What do you think about this? And then we get into a conversation and I give them a menu of options that we can start working on that they're willing and able to commit to.
and do you work tailoring yourself meals, not meals, I mean meal planning, but talking
Yeah.
about emphasizing certain foods or certain dietary patterns, or do you then
Yeah.
refer out for that?
So we do part of our job here as well is like we do utilize meal planning. Like I said, I do have my nutrition certifications. Now I'm not a dietitian, so like let's not
So
let's not
actually,
get
let's pause there because we didn't talk about all your certifications because
yeah,
you
yeah.
got a ton. So
Yeah,
so
yeah. Well, so my background's in exercise science. I'm a
yeah.
certified strength and conditioning coach for the NSCA. So I've done strength and conditioning for collegiate athletes, for pro athletes, and like mixed martial arts primarily. I was a wrestler myself, so like that's all that. And I still do endurance or still do a lot of like competitive athletic goals. So like exercise and nutrition is pretty dialed in or pretty much part of my life. And that's where I pursued a lot of my knowledge. So I do have my precision nutrition, which I think is like the best nutrition certification out there because it's worldwide. It's very nuanced what they do. They're very what I love about them is they really work on habits, routines, lifestyle. And they're not necessarily in that space of like a dietitian would do. My fiance is a dietitian, by the way, and they're, in the urgent care or clinical care and they're doing food, tube feeds and all that. That's not what we're doing. We're more so giving recommendations around portioning food choices and like lifestyle with the food. That's what I'm doing primarily.
Well, one of the I think major things to drive home and for people to understand is the vast majority of diseases as we get older are primarily caused by diet and lifestyle. It's not
Yeah.
genetics, although genetics can predispose you to some things.
Yeah.
Vast majority, even cancers as we get older, mostly driven by diet, lifestyle, cardiovascular disease, dementia, osteoporosis, although you do have the decline in hormones in both men and women that can occur as we get older. But a large part of that also of those conditions are driven by other things besides just the drop in hormones. So
Yeah.
having that foundation of exercise, of of cognitive behavioral therapy or
Hmm.
interviewing people and helping to unlock their potential or get them over that ambivalence, having the training in nutrition. That to me sounds like an amazing combination of
Yeah.
health coaching. And that
Yeah.
is not the minimum standard of excellence in your field, though, correct? What a lot of health coaches, they don't have all of that.
No, not all of them do. I've had a unique background. Like I really do would say that because like I did find always wanted to find myself in the clinical realm as a doctorate of physical therapy. That's what I was going to school for. But I got into coaching people and I had a lot of mentors talk to me, and I pivoted because I could get the grades. Like, don't get me wrong, I could get the grades. I was competitive enough. But I was personal training at the time, like 18 years old, and I was coaching people. And I realized, you know, I was talking to a business mentor of mine. He said, physical therapists are the same as a business person. Like you're either inpatient or you're outpatient or you're going to run your own business. Why don't you learn how to run a business? I learned how to run a business through personal training and getting all the qualifications and certifications. I've ran gyms and I've scaled gyms. And then I went into clinical work just due to the lockdown and everything. I just had to pivot. But I love the whole preventative aspect, John. I love the aspect that, like, okay, yes, you have physical therapy for people that definitely need the physical therapy. But the people that I was working with were like, these are so many preventative things we could do. There's so many daily preventative things that we can do, whether it be simply moving, doing some mobility, getting for a walk, watching what you eat, watching what you sleep. And that to me just seemed more exciting and seemed to be the kind of challenge I was looking for. And when I was doing, and mind you, when I was doing my physical therapy time and hours, back in the days, like what, 12 years ago, when I would do my interest, they're like, all right, just go put that guy on stim. And I was like, wait, what? Like, so I would just put someone on stim for 45 minutes. And it was just kind of this weird time where I was seeing online with different physical therapists, they were doing all these new modalities and different things. But the time that I was doing, the internship that I was doing was not privy to that. I guess maybe it was just the environment, but it just turned me off. In that, but I see now in physical therapists, there's a ton of great physical therapists that do a lot of work. But yeah, that's how I got into the clinical space. I learned a lot about exercise. I learned about a lot about nutrition. Then I learned a lot about lifestyle and the psychology of the coaching to really get into helping people.
Well, what's between our ears are what the stories we tell ourselves, or as my wife says, the bullshit stories that we tell ourselves
Yeah.
get in our way. So, what are some of those patterns, those mindsets that you think are some of the biggest obstacles, the messages, self sabotaging messages people are telling themselves?
All right. That's a great question. I'm going to list off a few, and I think it starts with beliefs, identity, and even like environment and community. And I'm going to break those down. It's like if you believe you are a certain way, like I just, I've heard it a million times, like Seamus, I just believe like I can't lose weight. Like that's one of the things. So they reinforce that belief, right? And then that reinforcement of that belief just becomes their identity. I'm a person that doesn't lose weight. So every time I work with them or I work with these type of people, that's one of the things that they say, the language they say, the beliefs, and then that identity gets reinforced. And they are just then self prophesizing that behavior in perpetuity in their behaviors, whether it be at home, at work, in their lifestyle, they're a person that doesn't lose weight or a person that's unhealthy, whatever it is you want to say. Most of the work that I do is around weight, just because that's one of the biggest things that we deal with in this day to day with uh, the country. But that happens, and I think when their identity is shifted, and that's what I work on a lot is shifting that identity. They can start making an adjustment, but I also want to add in environment and community. I think one of the things that I've been noticing a lot more in this health coaching, I've been doing this for about 10 plus years, is the environment and community. Environment plays a big role. One of my favorite little jokes, John Berardi's first law is that if a food is within reach, you're probably going to grab it. So the closer a food is, if it's by your hand, you're going to eat it sooner than if it's in a closet far away, like a trigger food or something like that. So making sure you set yourself up for an environment that is helpful and conducive for movement and for health promoting behavior. So if you can't control your home, for example, that might be an area that we need to look at. A lot of the people I work with, John, are professionals and they just sit all day. And one of the biggest things that we talk about is movement and movement, not even exercise, just activity. Can you get a standing desk? Can you just get walking while you work? And that has been a pivotal um, among hundreds and thousands of people I've recommended that to, has been pivotal for healthy recomposition of their weight and just daily activity. They've noticed they're less stressed, they're more productive in their work. A lot of sales guys that I work with, they're like, Seamus, I don't know what it is, but ever since I got the walking desk, I've been making sales calls like crazy, and closing. So that's one of the things that I think about. And then, so environment and then community. I think this is a harsh one, but taking a good close look at where you've come from and who the people are around you. And if your desires and goals of health don't match what they're putting out, you may have to really reconsider the time you're spending with the people. If you, especially if you are somebody that, grew up in a household that wasn't so healthy and you're trying to be healthy, you're listening to this podcast, you're listening to me, you're listening to John, you're like, I do want to make changes. Oh man, my parents were people that weren't into healthy behaviors, or they were. And then I changed my community. Now my community are people that, every Friday night we're going out, we're getting drinks or doing different things that aren't conducive to my goals. So I think it's your language, it's your beliefs, it's your identity, it's your environment, community. I think all those things can play a major role to your health goals, John.
I love how comprehensive you're looking at this and thinking about it, because I totally agree 100%. A couple things. One, I like the saying. I think it was Tony Robbins, but I'm not certain. If you change, just 1 degree. If you're
Yeah.
on a course and you move just 1 degree, if you're flying from LA to New York, you're going to end up in a whole different city. So
Yeah.
that just illustrates small changes. And just making a little bit of a change and just doing that consistently can make huge differences. Like you mentioned, a standing desk, simple, small change can
Yeah.
make a huge difference. But also that we are the sum of the people we surround ourselves with. And health behaviors are contagious,
Oh yeah.
without a doubt. Diet, exercise, all of it. We are influenced by the people who we're around.
Yeah.
That's a delicate topic, though. That's
It's a
a tough
really
one to
delicate.
navigate.
I that's why I say, like, when I said that, like, a little bit sensitive topic, because I don't try to, as a coach, I'm always trying to bring things up in awareness in a way that's non-confrontational. That's something that they teach us in that course, right? Non-violent communication. You want someone to change, but you're not telling them, hey, look here, this is how you have to change. You have to allow the person to come to that change for themselves. Because if you're telling someone what to do, they might do some of it, but they're not coming to that to their own degree. So they're not going to do it long term and sustainably. So when I say that with like love and like gratitude of like, these are the people that support you, they love you. However, if you're dealing with like a new goals, again, you've changed a new leaf, you turn a new leaf, you want to make healthier changes, taking a look at some of the people you want to work with. You can still have these people in your life, just understanding maybe you might have to make some adjustments. And I think the best analogy here is like, do you take financial advice from the homeless guy, or do you take it from, like a Charlie Munger? Like, they could be saying the same thing, but who do you take it from?
Yeah, look at aspirationally, who do you want to become? What aspects of what you see of their life are appealing to you?
Yeah.
That's essentially what you're, and look for people who have been successful in that. And hopefully people are in a good, healthy relationship, with a spouse, a significant other, where if they want to make some change, they'll be supported. I know
Yeah.
with my wife and I, we're always very supportive, and one of us wants to make a change, the other one's like, great, let's do it. I'll help you.
That's a big one. Yeah.
Yeah, because it can be, I mean, it can be toxic, frankly. And it's not just psychologically, because anything emotional is going to have
Yeah.
physical implications.
It is true. And I think, this is stuff that I've worked on personally, and also just like from the literature, from what I understand. If you have this desire to change, but if there is this immunity to change, or immunity to change, one of my favorite books is, you may have commitments, beliefs, or things that are stopping you. If you have a commitment to appease your partner, for example, right, John? Like, if it's to appease your partner, and that appeasement of your partner is more important than your actual success, well, you could be motivated and disciplined and do all the right things, but because that commitment to them being more appeased and they're not necessarily doing that with you, that's going to overrule that goal. So sometimes there are some blind spots within ourselves, within the people that we love, that hold us back. And it's not to say anything deleterious of anybody. It's just take stock of what's there and understand there might be some strings on you that you may not know about.
But in your line of work, I've got to imagine, you start talking to somebody and you get into these issues of relationship dynamics, and
Yeah.
you start getting into a situation where, if you are not coaching them correctly and helping them navigate that in a way that can be, articulated in a positive, constructive way,
Yeah.
if another health coach or somebody else is talking to them and coaches them in, because there's a level of trust that develops, right, between
Yes,
the health
sir.
coach and the client, and gives them advice, it could really um, create a lot of problems in somebody's marriage, I would imagine.
Yes, and I've seen that myself, and I always tell people, I'm like, I'd rather coach a couple than than not, because if I'm coaching one, it's a crazy dynamic. Because let's say it's talking about nutrition. Let's just go to nutrition coaching. Well, if I'm coaching the dad, the mom, and the child, well, the dad has to make something else, the mom makes something else, and then the child eats something else. So it's like three meals being made for dinner, for example. So there is a lot more work, and it creates a little bit of like intensity because it's like, Seamus, I asked you to make my life easier.
Mhm.
I didn't ask you to, make these adjustments. And I have to work with that. I have to work with that. And I'm be honest with you, I've seen sometimes how it has been affecting because one partner may be on. They're like motivated, they're going after it, and then one partner may not be. And I think this is where I've always told, and I've coached more women than I've coached men. And this is just something I've had, just the relationship with women that I've had in terms of coaching is I've always had to tell them compared to their partners, I'm like, you are in your story. You are in your own race. Like you cannot compare to your partner. Unfortunately, I know it's impossible, but it's like he may be doing something. Guys can lose weight in 5 seconds. Like they're like, oh, I just changed my diet, they lost weight. And then you could do everything perfectly, and then you don't. Um, and I think being able to be vulnerable with that and being able to hold space for someone like that and being patient with that and letting them know like these are the expectations that could be a little bit different for both of you, helps a little bit. But there is always that tension. I do agree. And I think it just again takes trust, takes some time and patience to allow it to work out.
I love what you said. You're in your own story. There's
Yeah.
so many times people play that comparison game, which is awful. I
Yeah.
mean, there's one thing about, aspiring, having aspirational goals because you see a way of living, or you see somebody who looks healthy, and you want to feel like you imagine that feels like.
Yeah.
And but then comparing yourself can just be absolutely demotivating.
Super demotivating, super demotivating. And I think, especially now with social media, I get a lot of clients and patients coming to social media, and I think the space is getting way more confusing. I just had an email the other day. This person was like, Seamus, is it strength? What is it? Strength versus hit? What am I doing? Like based off of what I'm supposed to do. And I'm like, without getting too much into it, I was like, for you specifically, in health, it's not an or thing for us. It's an and, it's strength and hit. But for you specifically, let's
Strength
talk
and
about
what? I'm sorry.
hit, high intensity interval training.
Strength
Uh,
and high intensity interval.
yeah, hit.
Got it.
And it's strength and hit, and it's flexibility, it's mobility, it's everything. I told her, and maybe for you right now, your goals we were looking at are this. So I tailored the conversation to make more sense for this. I told her in this day and age, especially with the comparison stuff and all the data that's out there, you're going to get so many conflicting views. I think a health coach, what I've done as a great job is I filter a lot of that noise and I give you exactly what you need at this specific time to give you the most actionable step because it's not about the processing of the information. It's not the next, book you read. It's not the next, you know, thing you find out about strength or hit like we just talked about. It's what is that next step you're able to commit to and now keep it as a sustainable part of your health lifestyle. And I had to work with that with her. And that that kind of personality, especially that person I work with, higher anxiety, has a lot of things on their mind, parent, and wants to get things perfect. And I think part of the identity of being wanting things to be perfect, you get kind of stuck in processing. So I have to really work and make sure I just distill things down into the most simple yet actionable things.
Perfection is the enemy of progress. And I
Yeah.
think that it also sets people up for failure because perfection is unrealistic. There is no such thing as perfection. And I think when we've got the right process, the actually I know when we have the right process or somebody does that, the results take care of themselves. And I think people who ask those questions about, is it strength or is it hit, they are looking for those absolutes. But I think there's a bigger issue here and a
Yeah.
deeper issue which you address with them, and that is, well, what are your goals?
Yeah.
Because hit may be part of it or it may not be.
Yeah.
It depends on what somebody's goals are and how they actually want to feel and be and live.
Yeah.
And one of the things too is I love your take on this. I tell people, they ask me, what's the best type of exercise? Well, for me, the best type of exercise is one that you will do consistently over time
Yeah.
and that is safe for you.
Or- yeah.
And that's going to
Exactly.
change over time. What people are interested, if they get bored, also that mindset, is it strength or is it hit? Well, it's maybe it's both, and maybe it's at different times, and maybe
Yeah.
it just changes over time and as
Yeah.
as you change.
Exactly. And I do want to emphasize because I did harp on diets and like different things earlier. Um, I'm very agnostic to everything. Like I have to coach everything. It's unfortunate. It's an unfortunate part of my job of like I have to know everything about being a plant-based eater, but then the next moment I'm coaching someone that's all carnivore, right? And it's being agnostic and being flexible as a coach to go like, I'm working with this person in front of me. This is what they're willing and able to do. This is what they're wanting to commit to. This is what we've done with their testing. This is what they are going to commit to. Okay, I'm just going to coach them. And I don't demonize anything because I'm just like, I am here to help you do this. Now, here's a few things. Obviously, based on some of their health markers and different things, we're going to explore other options if it's not being safe for them or not, indicated for them. But overall, I let the it's collaborative, That's the whole point. It's collaborative. I let them lead and I'm just keeping the guardrails on the side.
So I know that because you and I have talked the importance of protein.
Oh yeah.
You had me, and you were a phenomenal host. You and your partner had me on as a guest on your podcast recently,
Yes.
and I was grateful to be able to speak with you guys. It was evident during our conversation that you are an expert in nutrition, and we got in a conversation briefly about protein.
Yeah.
And within that, though, the research shows that people on vegan and vegetarian diets oftentimes aren't getting enough protein.
Yeah, yeah.
So, how do you meet somebody where they're at, but still ensure that even if you know that, well, maybe this isn't the healthiest dietary pattern for them, this is
Yeah.
where they're at now, and this is what they're convinced they need to do. You're not there to
Yeah.
change their mind, is
Yeah,
what I
I'm not
mean,
gonna change
to
it. Yeah.
talk them into anything. How do you then compensate for some of those dietary weaknesses?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I think, a lot of diets have a lot of dietary weaknesses, whether they're lacking in something, but let's just stick with the plant-based eater. Some of the easiest things that I've spoken with plant-based eaters is um, portioning, right? Maybe eating a little bit more, nutrient timing. But that also is a bit of a hard one as well, because if you are adding in more plant-based sources, you may be adding in more carbs and fats. And then that could also add in more bloating. Some of those sources are, you know, might have some fiber in them that might be a little bit hard. So the next best thing I also do then it would be a little bit of supplementation. And usually a lot of them are great with supplementation. They're comfortable with it. I think a lot of plant-based eaters expect to have supplementation, whether it be from iron or B vitamin deficiencies or different things like this, or even creatine. But protein is one. They're like, yeah, I'm willing to take a plant-based protein. And what's interesting is a lot of plant-based eaters, I don't know how far a person would go plant-based if it's true vegan, meaning the whole lifestyle is vegan, from what they purchase to what they wear to what, scents they use to what things they put on their skin. But I'm talking about a plant-based eater that's like, yes, I can have some egg whites or I can have some dairy. We work with that, right? We can work with that. And then some folks have also, for supplementation wise, something that I've learned in the last few years, thanks to food scientists, by the way, um, bone broth based like protein powders, things like this that are really great. They really mix well, they do well. So yeah, I think some of it's a little bit of looking at what's in the diet, if I can make some adjustments with the portions. If not, yeah, I would have to go with some supplementation. And most people are pretty receptive to that. They understand that the importance of protein is there. There's some back and forth with it with some of the longevity people. They're like, fasting and lower calories, is a great, metric to get into longevity. But I'm like, yeah, but if they don't have enough muscle mass, and bone health, like, and we get that from a lot of protein, different protein sources, like, does it really matter if you're living longer if you don't have the, pliability at the end of the day?
Well, and sarcopenia, the loss of muscle, is such a danger as people get older, and we talked
Yeah.
about people need more protein as they get older. So, you're
Yeah.
addressing that, which is amazing. Tell me about, can people work with you
Yeah.
remotely? How does your
Yeah. People can work with me remotely. I'm online. You just hit me up on Instagram. I have my socials there. I have like an application form. I do take people on, but it is like a higher service. I'm just gonna be honest and frank with them, just because the amount of work that I'm doing and the commitments and the way to service my people. I'm a person. Once you get into my realm and sphere, you're not a number. You're not a templated person, as you can tell from here. This little parasocial, interview. Um, Once you are within my scope of practice and me coaching you, I have to elevate you. Like once you're in my realm, like there's nothing else but like success and winning that we need to get to. Because that's just how I care for my people. And that's how I feel like I have to serve in this world. So that's how I do it. Marcos and I, we also have the platform, the macro perspective, and that's where we help people with free content on health day to day. And we do have some other like group coaching models in there as well that we've been building up. But primarily, if the people want to work with me, it's a one-on-one model. And what I mean by that is you get me day in, you get me weekly, you get me monthly. We're going. I'm not an AI chatbot guy. You're not just putting things into a template and you just call it a day. I feel like in nowadays, I think the human connection is that much more important, especially with technology rising, automations rising. I really think that the human aspect of my job is, I think, actually what's going to keep me having a job.
Yeah, that's true. That's kind of ironic, right? The differentiation is actually it's a person. Uh,
Yeah.
that becomes the unique value added thing. And frankly, I've realized with AI on looking at doing medical research, every AI platform that I put questions into and ask for the citations back on a health or medical issue. And then I go and read. I pull up the citation and I read the primary study that they're referring to. More often than not, that study has been mischaracterized by the AI summary, or often what happens is that citation that they are referencing has nothing to do with what the AI summary was about.
Yeah.
Totally different. And so I don't think all these, automated systems, first of all, they're not personal, despite the promise that you can have, personalization through AI. It's not there yet. Maybe it'll get there.
Yeah.
Frankly, a lot of these, the way that it's presenting the information, at least when I'm looking at the research, is inaccurate. And so having a person with your expertise, there's no substitute for that.
100%. I tell people all the time, like I do sit on a board for like an advisory board for Longevity AI. It's an AI company utilizing AI stuff, but these things hallucinate, they constantly need training and the work still has to get done. It just shortens the work a little bit. We call them co-pilots, right, John? They do some of the lift, but at the end of the day, you still need that person to do the second set of eyes to really make sure it makes sense contextually for the person they're about to give it to. Because I know a lot of people, for example, they put their health stuff into the chatbot in the AI and then tell me what's wrong. And it's like, I don't think you can even understand that, It's still pretty high level and there's no context to it. There's no context and there's no experience with someone else that has the years of experience working with people with similar goals or similar health issues as you. I think what a person does is it can give you good context and it makes you feel honestly safe at the end of the day of like, okay, I made a decision and collaborated with this person. The AI just gave me information. The other part is I'm collaborating and now we're moving forward with my
That's
behavior.
a great distinction. Where can people learn more about you and your work?
Yeah, you can just find me on social media, Seamus Matthew Sullivan on Instagram, and primarily, again, putting out a few episodes per week with Marcos, who's going to be on this pod soon enough. At the Macro Perspective podcast, we have amazing guests. We have over 150 plus episodes on just health and wellness topics, from understanding nutrition, understanding like the new craze of weight loss drugs to just behavior change things that I'm just so passionate about. And I just want to make sure that people get that information. And I know you've been on the podcast. So when that episode drops, people can listen to that as well. But yeah, people can find me there. And yeah, thank you so much for your time.
You're welcome. We're going to have all those links in the show notes. So make sure you check it out. And thank you. I learned a lot in this episode. Now I understand more about health coaches. I appreciate it. Thank you.
Yeah.